If you start by joining us for the Pledge of the Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Start by, if anybody wants to address the board, there's papers in the back to sign up to speak, and if you'll hand them to Mr. Shoemaker, appreciate that. And if you have one of these with you, please turn it to silent so we don't have phones ringing during the meeting. And I'll call the roll. Our district attorney, Tony Pierce, is here. Mr. Tinkle is present. Mr. Banks is present. Mrs. Feinberg is present. Mr. Guy is present. Mrs. Flaherty is present. And our district manager, Chris Shoemaker, is present. And Stephen Bloom said he would be available via phone if we needed him. So with that, do we have anyone signed up to speak?
Warren Davies, Stone Valley Loop.
Warren Davies.
And I will let the board members know you can hear the sound. The whole sound system's been redone.
I didn't know you could talk like this.
And we're making adjustments. Our contractor is here. We have all new recording equipment, projection equipment, cameras, speakers, and these mics are direct recording. So when the board member speaks, it's not being recorded from the center of the room. It's actually direct record here. And it can go to a thumb drive or a scan card.
No more secrets either.
So
No,
it'll
so-
pick up whispers.
Well, yep.
That will be good.
But if you speak into the mic, as I said, the audience, I don't think we'll have anyone else say, I can't hear you, and that's kind of what we're doing is adjusting the volume, and if need be, the camera can zoom into individual board members, or we can pan it. They did have a device where it would go to the person speaking, but sometimes people speak over each other, and it would be running back and forth. So right now, we're just panning the audience, but I have a control here that can go right into individual speakers, but this will really facilitate a better recording for sound and audio for transcribing notes at meetings.
That's great.
So with that, Mr. Davies, you're on the clock.
Microphones are working.
Warren Davies from Stony Brook, and going with what the engineer here said, the boss said, everything you say and whisper will be used against you at a later time, so be careful because we'll be able to hear you now for good. But that's not what I want to talk about. I just want to address the office building. It's been a year almost now that the board authorized to move forward with the building over here, and we have yet to turn a blade. It seems that a long time ago, the board decided the office needed space, and they worked with the Girl Scout building for I don't know how long. I was trying to find out today and couldn't find it in all the notes. Nothing got done. Then we decided we're going to put out the side here, so then we decided we're going to move the storage yard down the road, and after 3 years, that was never done, and then finally it was dissolved because of cost factors. I get concerned because I think even board members have seen the office space we have here for our staff. Many of our staff work out in the field and are out in the field all the time where they should be. Inside here, we have office people working back to back, office people, 2 people in office. The district manager does not have an office of his own. If it wasn't for this room, I don't think they'd be able to have any kind of private meeting, and this isn't private because people can walk into it. So I think there's just been a lack of urgency over the years on both our engineer in getting things done. Things seem to, for some reason, bog down when it gets to the permits. But talk to permit people, it shouldn't happen as long as it's happening, and you have to start questioning what's going on in that aspect. And then it has to come back down to the board. The board has not shown a sense of urgency to get this done. And until the board shows that sense of urgency, it's just going to be delayed. And it's been delayed now. It was supposed to be, I 180 days, and I think it's somewhere now at about 200 and some days for different reasons. I'm sure the engineers will be able to tell you this, that, and the other thing. But it still comes down, we have engineers who are supposed to know what's going on and get these things done, and the board should be the people pushing to get this done. It'll make a very much more efficient operation. A lot of people don't realize that when they call in the office that there's no real private conversations. We have computers. When you walk in and stand at the door, you can see the 3 computers, which probably has private information on it. And in my day when we worked, if any of those screens were that way, boy, that was taboo totally. Because, again, there's private information on those screens. Now, I'll grant you, with my eyesight, I can't see it, but there are some younger folks that probably could. And I don't think they come in to do that, but I think this is something we need to consider. We need to move along with this program and make sure our engineers know they need to move on so we can get this done, so our staff can be rewarded a little bit in getting a little more space than what they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Chris?
No, that's all the speakers we have for today.
Okay, that brings us to District Council, Karina, Phase 2.
Yes, Madam Chairman, members of the board, this is the last piece of this particular transaction puzzle matter to wrap up the permit challenge of South Florida Water Management District. We have received from Lennar a revised list of assets and inventory for the improvements for Queen of Phase 2. And we have, all the parties, you can see by the materials in the meeting book, have signed off on the partial assignment of drainage easements that provides the district with requisite access to get to the back of those properties and to the flowway. So what's recommended is that I think the board had authorized the chair to sign the settlement agreement previously, but I wanted to bring it back to have that reaffirmed as well as formally accepting the bill of sale. And so the warranty will start from the time of acceptance for the 1 year under the bill of sale as to the improvements. What will happen is once if the board approves this, we'll record that partial assignment of drainage easements, record the special warranty deed, and then within a few days after that, dismiss the petition with South Florida. And so the request is to authorize the chair to sign the settlement agreement and wrap this up.
Staff, engineering, everybody agreed that it's ready to go? I'll wait till everybody else talks, then I'll make a motion.
Anyone else have any
Second.
comment? Who seconded a motion you haven't made?
That's being efficient.
It's telepathy. It's, I make the motion that we go on ahead then and approve this action. Get this thing out of here.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, right, Mr. Guy?
Indeed,
Okay.
yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you very much.
District Engineer.
Madam Chair, if you want to, just one item not on the agenda, just for information. If you recall, and we're still trying to finalize that ADA agreement, and Leslie's picked up that and work with her to wrap that up with the ADA compliance company. But just for information, I have a copy I can hand out to you of a development in a case not involving this district, but involving another number of other parties. We're on the east coast of Florida. A plaintiff and his attorney were sanctioned heavily by a federal district court for bringing frivolous lawsuits. And so that's about a 21-page order. I'll have copies just for your information. So hopefully the litigation mill for this type of action will at least slow down a touch. I think this sends a strong message to all potential frivolous plaintiffs and their attorneys in this kind of matter. So that's just for information's sake.
Thank you.
Margaret, question, but we're going to come back to Tony on the issue of the plans for the county on the roundabout.
I guess when we have that discussion. I know-
You're going to be available for that.
Yeah, and Chris and I have we emailed on
I
it
got some,
briefly.
I got some real issues.
And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Tyler.
Good afternoon. So I'm Tyler Wainwright with Tetra Tech. I'll be your district engineer for tonight. So the first thing on here is our status update, and there's 3 task authorizations. Let me get through the status update first. So, apologize, let me flip to the page. I can just give you a quick rundown of each of these real quick. Lake bank restoration, both the inspection and the construction management, both of those are more or less complete. The inspection's obviously done. The construction management is down to one record drawing for one lake, but other than that, I think those are wrapped up. Surface water modeling, I believe Danny discussed that with you guys a meeting or two ago, but basically we're waiting to the completion of the rainy season to complete any calibration on that model, but other than that, that task is complete. Office building site plan, which was just discussed a moment ago. We heard as of Monday from Lee County that they were in the process of writing the permit approval, so you should have that within the next, usually it takes them about 10 days from the time I start writing to get all the approvals, so you should have that certainly by the next meeting.
I didn't hear that. That's for the building?
Yes, sir, that's for the building.
And are we stood up behind that, so once the permit comes in, Chris, are we ready to, what's the timeline from approval to?
Development order, and then we'll apply for a building permit. And that'll probably take another 30 days to get that approved.
Can't do them concurrently.
Have to have a development order to get the building permit. I mean, that's minor because the water and sewer is there. It's really just a topo and a site plan and a little fill, modular building, so.
Have we got it ready to go? Is the request ready to go so that the
Working
minute
on
the
it right
DO
now.
is?
Well, as soon as we have the DO, the building permit application's underway right now, and we just have to get the permit fee and submit that.
And the building vendor, is that all lined up? All we have to do is, once we get all the permits and the DO and everything ready to go?
We have the contract, and we just have to approve the expenditure. We brought it to the board, and it was delayed wisely by Mr. Guy until we had the development permit.
No other issues that stand in the way once we got the DO and then we have the building permit?
No, the building now is slowed a little bit because they got a big backlog for hurricane and also all the portables that go into schools, which we weren't dealing with, last spring. So it won't be a 3 to 4 week, it'll be a 4 to 6 week process to get the building delivered
So
after
I
they get
hesitate to
the
ask
PO.
the question, when will we be moving chairs in
We're
and
lucky-
bodies
We're lucky Christmas, first of the year.
that late?
Well, 3 months.
Okay. Continue using the skyhooks.
So that's it for our involvement on the building plan. The high school plan review, that is done, awaiting construction from Lee County Schools for any further action on us. So it was basically 2 steps. 1, to do plan review, which is done, and then 2, do construction inspection when construction starts. So we're just on hold until construction begins on that.
And when is their projected groundbreaking? When do those start?
I don't know if they have a firm date yet. I know that they're still working on about 1 million permits to get. I don't know if they have an actual firm start date yet.
I thought when they were here a couple of
Oh, they
weeks
had a-
ago, they said October.
Yeah, that's what,
Okay.
Ground clearing, site clearing, October, I thought that guy said.
They are going to start in October?
That's what I thought he said.
I think they're going to, I shouldn't guess at it, but I think they're going to do it in phases. 'Cause I don't think they have their Army Corps permit yet for that wetland impact, but I could be wrong. In any case, we're waiting for construction to begin on that before we have any services there. Lake Bay permitting is still in review at the county. That's been there for, I think, 2 months now. So we're waiting for them to respond to our permit application. The clean water facilities plan, this is for the utilities improvements. That's about 50% done. Once we get a draft complete of that, we'll bring that before the board for review and for comments, and then we'll submit that to the DEP. And then finally, the last one is the design of the next phase of lakes. We are moving forward with 6 lakes as of right now. That'll be the next package to go out to bid, and those should be complete in about a month.
Great.
So that's it for our current task authorizations.
Madam Chairman.
yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Tyler, the next last one, 19-12, would you help me remember exactly what that's about?
Yes, sir. So there was a mishmash of utilities improvements that was planned in the 5-year and 10-year capital improvements plan, adding irrigation mains, adding redundant force mains for hurricane hardness and things like that, adding pumps out of the pump station, a variety of different utilities projects. So the task is to prepare a facilities plan, which is the first step in securing SRF funding from the state to do those projects. So this is the planning phase of those projects to obtain funding from the state.
And has this board approved the task authorization on that?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So we're about halfway done with writing that facilities plan. Sorry. And yeah, it's approved. It's underway.
Bill, I think we approved it at least to get to the facility plan, then the issue of whether we go to design and/or design phase is based upon the approval of facility plan and funding. We haven't gone that far yet.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see the permitting for the first 5 lakes.
It was my question. I have it written down on my sheet.
Okay.
The LDO on the first 5.
That's 19-11 Lake Bank permitting. It's the third one from the bottom.
Okay.
So we submitted that on July 2nd, and we're waiting a response from Lee County.
Is this
I
the?
thought I saw a response from them that they had a bunch of questions on the maintenance plan, and I can't remember all the specifics. I didn't print it.
I got an email from Tom Sawtell regarding the maintenance plan that we submitted. He asked that be recorded in the public record. But other than that, I don't think I've seen an official response from them. If we have, we'll get after it. But I don't know if we've gotten an official response from them yet, have we?
Yeah,
There's
we
a letter in sufficiency. I sent it to you and Danny. I had some questions on the survey, and I can get you a copy of it.
Okay.
What was that? Refresh my memory. What was that on? Was that the original ponds?
That's the very first.
Very
5
first ponds, and we aren't going back and revisiting this issue of hardened surface, are we?
No, they asked for a development order for the very first 5 ponds that got done. And that's what this is for, without getting into a ton of detail after that.
I thought, Tony, that we stopped that on the basis that this was a maintenance issue and we didn't have to jump through all these silly hoops. I thought that was
So,
resolved.
Without dredging up a ton of history, basically the original thing that the county told us was that permitting was not required, and then subsequent staff told us that it was required. So regardless of how we got there, that it is required, and we're in the process of obtaining a permit for those.
Any other questions?
Yeah, a couple. In the paper this morning or yesterday, I don't remember which one, there was an announcement that Timber Creek is going to be holding their public hearing on October 1st downtown with the county. Well, is it a hearing examiner first?
They already had the hearing examiner hearing.
So this is going before the commissioners?
Yes, my understanding is August 29th, there was a hearing examiner hearing on changing their PUD to remove the prohibition on blasting.
Okay,
My understanding.
my question, I got the thing in the paper, and I'm just asking, does any of the things they're doing and/or petitioning for impact us?
To be real honest with you, I don't know what they petitioned for.
You know, if you got something?
Haven't had a chance to read the staff report yet, so I just.
Okay.
Well,
So
I just, Chris, I've just found out about this last week, late last week, I think. I think the day after the hearing examiner hearing, I think it was Friday the 30th. And I believe that notice had been sent out to various property owners in advance, and posting had occurred on Daniels Parkway for the hearing examiner hearing on August 29th.
What's the blasting for, the lakes, ponds,
Probably for rock removal.
rock removal? Okay. Okay, well, I just want to make sure I saw it in the paper, and I thought, okay, are they changing something that impacts what we've done? Because I can only think of 2 things that would really raise my ire. 1, stormwater, and 2, the reuse water at the wastewater treatment plant. They're not trying to weasel in and claim that, I hope.
I mean, I can answer those 2 parts of it. As far as the stormwater being conveyed through Gateway, I don't believe they've proposed any changes to that because they'd have to modify the ERP, and we are on the notification list for that. So if they had done so, we would have been notified. So I don't think they did.
So we're still going across the FPL easement and dumping into the Worthington property?
As far as I know, there's no change to that. And then the second part about the reuse, they had, when they went to get their, what is it? I guess their PUD, would be their first submittal. They requested reuse from the county, and the county denied it on the basis that it was all being used by Gateway, and there's no change that's happened to that.
Good, good. Did a good job, Tony.
Well, I didn't do anything on it, but what I might just do is, Ed, I have a copy of the staff report. And
Okay,
you
I
may
would like
want-
to look at that.
I'll give it to you, and then you can see whether or not there are other concerns that we have.
Next one is, I don't know if we're going to have a clarification of it, but the gentleman that comes in from Hampton Park, Charlie, that is, Charles, did get back with me after the meeting that we had at the church, and I contacted the person at the South Florida Water Management District. He was kind enough to at least give me the name of the guy. It wasn't a janitor, at least. And the question that was asked was confusing. And the gentleman from the state that answered the question thought that the question was, can we withdraw water from the ponds for reuse? Little different than taking reuse and dumping it into the ponds. He didn't understand the question. I said, well, you've got to watch that type of stuff. You guys can get trapped when you answer a question that you thought you knew was the right question, you gave him the wrong answer. Long story short is that just would like to have, maybe for the next meeting, so that we can put this to rest, that Danny had given me today, this 62610, and I know nothing about 62610 other than supposedly when you have a wastewater treatment plant and you're discharging water, if you're proposing to discharge it, it's under 62.610. And there are requirements for that water if it's going to go anywhere other than, let's say, irrigation reuse. In other words, if you were going to dump it into a pond, that's in a whole different discharge deal. I think I would like to have an answer so that maybe at the next meeting, we can get back to this man and, because he's blowing us all over and making us look like the scourge of the earth on what we're doing in the way of planning for irrigation use. And he thinks it's as simple as we just put a pipe in from the wastewater treatment plant over here and dump it into the pond across the street. And it's not that simple at all. So I'd like to put this to rest. Can we dump water from the wastewater treatment plant that we cannot use when it's raining into a pond?
Can I interject here?
I'm not allowed to answer that part, but I can answer your question if you'd like.
Go ahead.
I don't recall if it's in, so we're talking about the Florida Administrative Code, 62-610. I don't recall if it's in 62-610 or 62-604. I don't remember which wastewater rule it's under, but I can tell you with 100% certainty, it is illegal to dump treated effluent into surface water bodies directly. Cannot do that. Your public access reuse has to be land applied.
Can you just bring that as a deal at the next meeting? Just a simple paragraph indicating that we'll put this to rest, because this guy really thinks we're making a big mistake of putting in all these facilities that we just simply go out there and put in a pipe and dump the water we don't need. And it's not that simple at all.
It's an entirely separate
I know.
issue,
Yeah.
and the answer is no. You
Tyler,
can't.
would you state that, your statement again? I want to make sure I understand it. You said it was entirely illegal, and then you went on, and I want to hear that again, please.
It is, again, I don't remember if it's 62-610 or 62-604, but one of those Florida administrative codes. You cannot directly discharge treated wastewater effluent into
Treated or untreated?
well, either way, but even if it's treated,
Definitely treated.
into surface water bodies.
Yeah. Untreated is just a no-brainer. You can't dump raw sewage into a pond, but,
Well, I would think so.
but treated water is what this guy's talking about.
But treated, you can't put it in either, is that so?
You can use it for public access irrigation
You
reuse.
can put it on, you can put it
On the ground.
on the grass, but you can't put it in the pond. Is that what I'm to understand?
That's the shortest way to say it, yes, sir.
Pollution.
Thank you. That's,
So we can definitely prepare a memo and provide that to you citing the appropriate section of the Florida Administrative Code, I suppose.
And just so I'm clear, that's because whatever the water has been treated, so if you directly discharge, it could change, it could just impact that surface water area as opposed to throwing it on the ground.
Basically, here's the issue. Effluent is treated to a varying degree of levels as far as nutrient removal, fecal coliform removal, a bunch of different parameters that they regulate wastewater on. The idea is that when it's land applied, those high nutrient levels get sucked up into the land and not discharged into surface waters. The idea is to keep things like algae blooms, phosphorus buildups, high nitrogen levels out of surface waters. That's why it's land applied. They don't just dump it in a lake. So if you were to do that, you'd basically be dumping fertilizer nonstop, 24 hours a day, straight into your pond system.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible, terrible idea. Do not do that.
I want to get that clarified.
That's what we want in writing.
We're happy to write that.
Although I think that at times there are separate reuse ponds that are not part of the stormwater management system, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's separate.
That's it. So again,
issue.
you are allowed under certain conditions to have surface water discharges, but that effluent has to be treated to a far higher level to remove those nutrients and things like that you're trying to keep out of surface waters. Another way to permit it and dispose of it is into ponds that are self-contained that don't discharge anywhere. It's basically a big storage pond you pump out of and then you land apply it, you irrigate it. So yeah, you can do that. But
Or
you can't-
inject.
Or inject. There's a lot of different things you can do, but you can't just dump water into a pond to let it flow out into eventually what's a water of the state in the 6 Mile Slough.
Okay. The last one is, and I don't know to what extent that maybe Chris has got you involved. We got the warning, I guess, from South Florida on the discharge we had of raw sewage during the pipe blow up. What do we need, or have you gotten involved to the extent of what do we need that if this happens again, and with the aging of our system, it won't surprise me one bit that it happens again, and raw sewage that comes out until we get there, that's going to flow to wherever it flows. It's going to go downhill, and it's going to get in a drain inlet, and it's going to go into the system. I'm not worried about that. That'll happen. But when we get there on site, what kind of facilities are they anticipating, and maybe, Chris, this is for you too, what kind of facilities do we have to go and have to prevent that water from going into the storm sewers? Are we expected to have pumps that can pump 500,000, 10,000 gallon a minute when you have a 12-inch line break? What's our liability on that from an engineering perspective?
That's a complicated question. I don't know if I should be answering questions on what your liability is. I don't know if that's something that I need to be telling you.
Very
But
smart.
Or are we in trouble? Well, we already know we're in trouble. They told us not to do it again. What I'm trying to do is, what do we have to do to protect ourselves?
To minimize exposure.
Yeah,
How's
do
that?
we have to go out and buy a 10,000 gallon tanker? Do we have to have a 10,000 gallon per minute pump? Because if you're standing there just like the other day we had in that hole, I mean, that water that just kept coming. What do you do with it? Sell straws?
There are guidelines in the Florida Administrative Code on how to handle sanitary sewer overflows. There's entire chapters of it that's dedicated to response of them. I don't want to sit here and tell you them because I don't normally get involved in the operations side of things, so I don't want to say something that's incorrect.
Where I'm going with all this is if we have to buy something, what do we need to do to include it in the facility plan?
You have to buy something.
We have to buy trash pumps and/or a storage tanker. Can we include that in the facility plan on the stormwater side?
I mean, I guess you could. I suppose that's more of a staff question of how they want to handle it. I can tell you that most utilities, I think nearly every utility that we work with, they contract with pumper trucks to do that and to haul it off and to dispose of it at a treatment facility, a wastewater plant that's permitted to receive flows from outside areas.
I'm not too aware of many subs or vendors that I'm associated with that have tank trucks sitting around waiting to dump sewage in.
This might be a better question.
Yeah, it might be something,
Chris to-
yeah, I just wondered if how far, to what extent have we gone to research this? Because I see it as, we got a good warning.
Yeah, we have 3 different vendors that we use that have pump trucks in back
That they can,
trucks,
that they
yeah.
can do it? Okay.
And for the most part, they have been very responsive. Even on Labor Day, we had a minor issue down by one of the restaurants on Gateway, and came in and, that truck worked that section and basically cleaned it out and took it and deposited the waste into another station while they were working on it. The question is whether you'd want to make that expenditure to buy a vac truck and have 2 CDL-equipped
Yeah,
staff.
if we got vendors that do it, I don't have a problem. My thing is that usually there's a manhole pretty close by that you would be able to just put in a trash pump and run the pipe down and run it into there. But if 50 yards away, the pump station you're running it into is power's off because the valves don't work, you haven't solved anything.
Or you're dumping it in the station that's going to put it right in the pipe.
Or put it in the pipe
So-
that's gonna go right back in the hole. Yeah, that's brilliant.
That'd be good.
So, okay, well, it's something we
Need a
need to look at.
permit
I
for
just
that.
want to make sure that we're prepared the next time that this happens, that we don't have any, there's going to be a spill, but a unavoidable spill, that's something different. And it maybe if these vendors, we can talk them into having it and have it ready to go to help us.
Well, I guess I could spin this in a positive way. One of the things that you're doing in the utilities facility plan that you're putting together is a bypass or a
Bypass
redundant
lines,
force main
yeah.
that would help with that, because you would be able to shut that line off and pump
Yeah.
it some other way.
Good deal. Okay,
So, yeah.
thank you. That's all I had.
Change orders?
Change orders. Yeah, do you want to tackle those first?
Change orders or task authorization?
We can do either or. As
The task authorization's fine, just, I was, Lake 83.
So for Lake 83, I'm going to pause for a minute and I'm going to ask Chris a question, because Danny and Chris had some conversation earlier this week about whether these were going to be on this agenda or not due to funding and approval by other people like PPAC for the other lake and things like that. So I can talk about these if you'd like me to explain what they are, but I don't know if we're actually still proposing to do these or...
Yeah, Danny and I spoke about it, and we left it on the agenda for the discussion with the Lake 83 task order, which is the Magnolia Lakes, and looking at the engineering to move the structure. What we discussed was waiting till they finish the overall system hydrologic plan that they're working on right now, because this is a segment, and that's real similar to Hampton Park when we looked at attacking that by itself.
What about the weir?
Yes, sir. And we looked at, let's finish the system-wide plan. So Danny and I were talking, said, well, it may be more prudent to, because it'll only be a matter of a few months to finish the overall plan. Then you have that big system data to attack something like this.
Did we get a resolution of that wetland up there that was the basis for that pond being at the weir elevation that it is? Is that, we gonna have that wetland, that little fractional piece of a wetland that we've got on our side? Is it gonna go away when the
That's
school goes?
That's part of this permit. It would be a permit modification, and that's part of this task order.
Because if we get rid of that, then the justification for the weir elevation where it's at goes away.
So, all right, with that in mind, let me explain what this is really quick. So this is for Lake 83. This is the lake immediately south of the high school parcel. So there's been a bunch of historical issues with that lake that you all are familiar with. One of the reasons that that lake has challenges is that it's set at a very high control elevation, and it was set that high because of the established wetland that was there historically to the north of that before that area got developed. So when developers go in and propose to construct something, to do a development, they are required to maintain the existing hydrology that's there prior to their design. So what that means is they basically go out and they survey the wetlands and say, okay, the high water marks in this wetland are whatever, in this case 24 feet. So then the water management district would make you establish your control elevation of your retention ponds at that same elevation so that you're not drying out that wetland, so the wetland stays wet. So because that wetland was high, it just means that that lake doesn't flow as much as the others, and there's just not a lot of action in that lake, so it can be stagnant at times, which causes other issues that have been dealt with since it was constructed. So anyway, the long story short here is that wetland that made this lake be high is going away. At least about 90% of it is when the high school comes in and mitigates that wetland to construct the high school. So Danny and did Chris go? Maybe with Chris go. Danny and somebody went to water management and discussed the wetland issue. And what they found out was that the high school was actually required to mitigate all of the wetland for their project, not just the portion of the wetland on their property. So a whole bunch of that wetland is on the school property, and a little bit of that wetland is on the gateway side of the line. So the high school was required to mitigate all of it. So what that means is that presumably we could permit for that wetland to go away, more or less. And not talking about cutting down trees or anything like that, but it would remove the requirement for that control elevation of the lake to be so high. So then you could lower it, which is described herein, and have that lake flow more and act more like the other lakes in Gateway.
And that's gonna cost us $50,000?
It could on a not to exceed time and materials basis. That's what is being
Sounds like a
proposed.
lot.
It is. I agree.
So what is the other portion of that that's not included in this? So there was something else you wanted to complete first.
So what Chris was talking about is that model that we have for all the surface water in Gateway.
Okay.
I guess, and I'm sorry I wasn't party to this conversation between him and Danny, but I think the idea was that we would wait to submit any permits to South Florida until that model was completed, to ensure that we could demonstrate there's no downstream impacts to other lakes or things like that. I guess that's what the plan is that correct?
And they have been surveying out there for the lake bank and the staff gauge, and I think the gauge has been set anyway. We're starting to do the data collection on that lake independent.
So are we
That's what
saying?
it's all about.
So are we saying we're holding on this until we get the other information on the hydraulic study? Or,
That's what we discussed, because if the district came back and said, well, what about downstream impacts, and started playing that game, then that piece of work is already done.
okay.
But we wanted to bring this up and talk about it.
And then, is the elevation 24 or 25?
4, I think.
I think it
Is it
says in here
24?
24.
For some reason, it was an absurd number.
It's really high. I think it's
very
I
high.
think it's 2 feet higher than the next
I
downstream.
know
from
it.
what I recall.
That's why I thought it was 25. But anyway, it's high, and it needs to be lowered.
Knowing that this is going to take time, we're already working on the hydraulic, the collection of the data. How long, presumably, how long would this take to complete this portion of it?
This says that design will take 90 days, bidding will take an additional 60, and then construction will take 180.
So why don't we work on it simultaneously with the other? Because if you're talking about that much time,
And them together.
yeah, do it together rather than wait for the one and then start this one, because that, all that does is just delay this project, and we know that lake needs help.
It's entirely up to the board. However you'd like to proceed, we can get started on what we can get started on, and
I agree with that, because 83 is one of our top ponds on bank reconstruction. And if we're gonna be doing it, might as well just have a jolly old time up there. Get this hit too.
Sounds like we run it concurrently. Design takes place. That'll give us the time for the hydraulic study to or
finish.
to be complete. So if we need any,
They could come together pretty easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I make the motion to proceed with that task authorization. Are we talking about going straight to design? There's no planning in this? It's just straight to design, correct? That's the way
yes,
I'm-
sir. I don't
that's the
see
way I'm
any sort
reading
of
it.
planning task on here.
Yeah,
I guess also to address Bill's comment earlier, it is a big number for sure, but that's the absolute cap that we have to give you. So all of our contracts are on a time and material not to exceed basis. So
These are all, this is all phases. This is design, bidding, and construction phases.
this is the whole
services.
deal.
Okay,
So
that's what I thought.
I would love to get this done for far less than this. It depends on
So would
what the
we.
permitting agency asks us to do.
And it's all NTE,
Yes, sir.
all three phases? Okay.
Correct.
Again, I'll make the motion, go on ahead and proceed with task authorization 2019-14 for Lake 83 with the intent of trying to get the construction phase of it to match up with the Lake Bank project that's coming up on 83 also.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and
just-
second.
Yeah, just one point of clarity.
Discussion.
83 is also the lake we have the water quality issues.
Yeah,
Yes.
Magnolia Lakes.
All right.
Question?
Yeah, I had just to exceed, to add to that motion, not to exceed the amount that's there. Could we do that? Not to exceed the 50,121?
Agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know the seconder will agree to that.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Madam Chair, I will add, we'll have to look around and find the money because there is no engineering money in the budget to do this project, in the existing budget or any room in our engineering sections under stormwater or utilities for this type of project. So it would have to come out of, have to start looking around and see where we can find some extra money, or have to be appropriated out of carry forward funds from the October 1st budget would be probably my suggestion.
Any
That
chance?
was what I was getting ready to say, just do it on the carry forward. Do we have any, Stephen's not here, do we have any projections of, or do we have, how black is the
200,000?
black ink?
It's about typical and, years, and a lot of times we use that money to carry through from October till a lot of the tax receipts start coming in, but it'll be consistent with past years, that 250,000,
I'd say
275.
look at that.
Is there any chance this can be added to the SRF on this particular lake, since that would be part of the, I don't know what their requirements are, but, I mean, it's,
It would be sort of a stretch, because the activity that's being performed is not
not
what was
Lake
described
Bank,
in the
yeah.
facilities plan.
okay. Just thought I'd ask the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I asked Mr. Bloom if there was anything going to be left over in this year's budget, and he told me between 300 and 400,000, so.
That's about what we had last year.
I'll just throw out there that the two on that task update that we gave you, the very first two that are complete, I don't know the exact number, but there's like $25,000 remaining on those that's not going to be expended, so
Okay.
it's like half of it.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we should be calling that out anytime we perform a task under budget and, heaven forbid, under, on time,
On
just
time.
for the record, so,
I would
we
keep,
celebrate your wins however you can get them.
I'll bring the confetti, yeah.
So that's that one.
But did we approve that?
the next was Lake 38.
Yes, ma'am. This is Lake 38. So this is another, maybe, I'm not sure what's going to happen with this. So I'll explain what it is first, and then.
Where's 38, remind me?
Pelican Reserve, over there,
Pelican
the
Reserve.
floods coming off of Bridgetown.
Bridgetown, okay.
Okay, so this is the lake. If you go into Pelican Reserve, go down Pelican Reserve Boulevard, all the way till you hit that roundabout, all the way at the southern end. It's that lake down there.
Turn right.
And it's the lake that abuts Pelican on one side and Bridgetown on the other side. And there's a great big wetland on the Bridgetown side of things that water flows into from Bridgetown into that lake. Then from that lake, it takes water from there out the Gateway Flowway, and away she goes. So the background on this and why we're even talking about this is back during Hurricane Irma days, the two structures that flooded in Gateway were on this lake. So anyway, we went through a whole bunch of history, and I think we've discussed the memos at the board and gone back and forth, but long story short is the control elevation of the lake is very high. And we're trying to come up with a solution to make those structures not flood. Now, I will be the very first one to tell you, and I think I've said this a couple of times at this board meeting, even if you do all of this, I'm still not going to tell you those houses are not going to flood under the conditions that they flooded under last time. Still could very well happen. However, the district said that doing nothing was not an option. So the options that are presented in here are the ones that are viable from an engineering construction standpoint. So this proposal, or this professional services task authorization, is for us to perform a variety of permitting and design and construction and management efforts to solve or improve that situation. Now, the question mark is, I think Chris and Danny had discussed, does this need to go to PPAC first? Because they would maybe theoretically need to approve it because of how funds are being allocated, and I'm not sure where that part ended up, so.
That part ended up, as we said, well, the board can approve it contingent on approval at the next PPAC meeting and move forward.
And I've read this thing till I'm blue in the face. There is a risk, and like you said, if we get a big one, another Irma, God only knows what you'd have to do to prevent that from happening again. But right now, what you're talking about doing is essentially extending a barrier, a dam, a berm, both east and west, similar to the elevation of, I guess, the golf cart path as it comes across the driveway, that being a guideline as to how high it would go up, that now all of a sudden we're providing more storage behind the weir to be able to stop it. The only thing that could happen is that we get that same thing that happened to Irma 3 weeks before this thing. We get 13 inches of rain, you fill up the basin, and then you get 10 more inches. Where's it gonna go? The only way I know is, would like to see on it is looking at the control structure itself. That weir's, what is it, 5 feet wide? I think it's 5 feet wide, something like that. Is maybe do something to make that weir adjustable to be able to, ahead of a rain event, drop it down and get the water out of there so that you have more storage. But I don't see any other way you're going to do it. Our problem is that Bridgetown, they have no idea. I've asked a letter to their engineer where the water goes. They can't answer where their water goes. It either heads to us via this point here, or it goes across tree line and into Botanica. But the line that's going across to Botanica, I believe, was either a 24 or a 36-inch pipe. Well, that pipe can no more handle the flow coming off Bridgetown than man in the moon. So the water's going to stack up, and what it's going to do is back up, come up here to the north end, and come right in on Gateway. That's why the original stormwater management plan for Gateway, if you get your magnifying glass out at Johnson's 1986 report, it says 42 CFS coming in this way. Plan on it. And if you do a calculation of the weir at the peak rate of flow on discharge, it works out so miraculously close to 42 CFS. So this didn't happen. It was designed this way. I think where the problem is that elevation of that building, or those series of buildings, what is it, Bill, Viadana?
That's right.
I got my questions about, somebody lost a decimal point. Those buildings should have been maybe a foot higher. But anyway, that's water over the dam, or water over the berm, water over the berm. Yeah, I don't see that we have any choice. We gotta do this.
Could I ask a question or two when you?
Certainly,
done.
go right ahead.
I know this is very important. And I very likely am gonna vote for it. But it sounds to me like a former farmer with a tractor and a front-end loader in 2 days could build a ramp there, and we'd be all done with it, instead of spending $73,000 to think about it. Now, if this weren't Pelican Preserve, I might vote against this damn thing, to tell you the truth.
Well, it's not an election
Bill,
year.
that's got a connotation to it. I don't think, I'm not even gonna read between the lines there.
I might even vote against it anyway, but no.
Let's put it this way, Bill. Somebody with a backhoe and a tractor and a lot of dirt would be fined more than $73,000 by South Florida Water Management District for not getting this permitted.
That'd be about the amount of the fine.
And/or try to send him to jail.
So,
Same thing as designing a bridge. I can throw rocks until I get across the water.
I'll throw this out there, and
That's
you know,
all
I think we kind of said this jokingly one time, but I'm really very serious. Another option is to raise the elevation of those buildings. That's out there.
Raise the elevation of the building.
You can do that. And it very well may be cheaper than what you're going to end up doing here. It's a possibility that should be considered at least, is what I'm saying.
And like the owl said, who?
So the problem with doing that is that it's a private structure that we have no
Control over.
interest in and can't do anything with. So that's I guess the challenge with that one. So there's not a good, easy solution to this. It's a big mess, basically.
Well, the other thing too is this again is the planning phase, the design phase, the bidding phase, and the construction phase. It's all the phases is the total of the fee.
That's correct.
Mrs. Flaherty?
Yes, thank you. Your design on this task is $43,684, but on the other lake, it was only $35,898. Could you
more work.
explain why it would be more for this one, a Pelican? Or is it
work.
just because it's a Pelican?
While I very much appreciate the semi-loaded question there,
If it were, it'd be higher.
it's apples and oranges. It's two different projects.
totally
There's
different
so again, I will say this. This is a not to exceed time and materials cap. I think in just about every job we've ever done with you, we've never spent the whole amount of money that has been in these time and materials not to exceed cap. To answer your specific question about why one is more than the other, is because when my boss was putting it together and came up with the labor plan that's included in there and wrote down the number of hours of how many hours he expected to permit it and how many hours those individuals would work on them, in his opinion, he thought it was going to be more work. And I agree with that. I think this is definitely a bigger job and a higher level of permitting than the other one.
Much more
Thank you, that
So-
explains why it's.
So you're looking for I'll get back to you in just a minute, but first I just want to say, so you're looking for a motion to approve this pending P-PAC getting a chance to yay or nay it, is that correct?
That would be my
I'd make that motion.
recommendation.
Subject to P-PAC's review and approval.
And I'll second that, so
Okay.
that it doesn't exceed the amount that's suggested
Yeah.
here.
One other thing is.
Oh, just a minute, Ed.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Guy wanted to ask a question.
Tyler, if
Sorry.
you'll look at page 48 that has the dollars up on top and the time and schedule performance at the bottom.
Yes, sir.
If you go to the number of calendar days and start with 60 and add 90, you get 150, not 120.
I think what he's trying to say there is that we can start design
Overlap.
concurrently with some of the preliminary, and I agree with you, that's poorly laid out there, but
Add
I
another
think that's what he's
60,
trying
you
to say.
get 210, and another 180, you get 390, not 360.
I think he's overlapping days is what he's doing.
I think what he's trying to do is overlap and say tasks are gonna run concurrently. But I can confirm that with him if he'd like, and we can modify that if needed.
Margaret, question on this. Tyler, I went out there and looked at this the other day, and the one thing I want to make sure of is that when we start putting in berms, we're going to chew up some land. Have we got an easement issue, especially going east? Because to tie back into an elevation,
On the home side, you mean?
yeah, because you aren't going to go into the wetland, we know that. So the toe of the slope is going to start at the edge of the wetland, and then the berm's going to go up and come back down. Usually it's going to, even if it's a foot or 18 inches, that's still at 4 to 1. I'm just worried about land acquisition. Do we have an issue, or is there an easement that's along the toe of that current wetland that allows us to build this, bring in the dirt and build this? The other side's a golf course. I don't think there's an issue there, but
I think you have sufficient room within your existing easements and wetland buffers to build it. I will tell you this, I have no idea what the homeowners are gonna think when they get a big old berm in the backyard. That's beyond me to try to say, but it's definitely a potential that people are not gonna like it.
what they're looking at right now, I can't see that they would complain. You know, if you make it halfway decent on the berm.
And you're talking about how many, what's the,
What is it, 3 buildings, 2 buildings?
How tall, you mean?
Yeah.
Couple of feet. I mean, maybe as much as 4 feet.
I would think they'd prefer that to flooding.
Yeah?
The problem is they're on the high end.
Yeah, the problem is
The
gonna
people
be
at the other end are the ones that getting,
the people
getting,
that
that's
didn't-
the problem.
So,
I just bring it up because I'm concerned about the land acquisition issue. On the golf course side, you can put in that berm and nobody will even know it's there. But on that east side, it's gonna be a little tight.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have room to do it in your existing easement. It's not gonna be the most aesthetic looking structure.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next.
And that was contingent on getting P-PAC.
Yeah, that was part of the motion, yeah.
I think this one's going away. I think Chris hired the contractor to do this. So this is trying to get a building permit for the building. We were asked to provide this task authorization to do or help obtain the building permit. The challenge is that we can't get a building permit because it has to be obtained by the contractor. So it was, sort of didn't really make sense to do. So I believe it's gonna go away, and I think you had hired the contractor to do this, right?
Yes. And I talked to Danny about it. He had offered some assistance if we needed it. The development order is going to provide the survey information and that we need for the building permit. So we're just going to have, they aren't a contractor and can't pull a building permit, so we're just hiring a contractor directly.
I missed that, sorry. We're not going to do that permitting deal. Okay.
As assistance, we're just going to hire the building contractor to pull the permit, as Tetra Tech can't pull it because they aren't a licensed contractor.
Sounds good.
Do we need a motion to say that this is, we're not going to go ahead with anything on that?
That's just a proposal, so the board doesn't need to vote on it.
So the very last thing on there, that's the change orders related to time for the two development order submittals. I guess that was requested from
We
us.
asked for it, I thought.
I will tell you that I don't think we plan on billing you anything more for those. So I don't know if you need to do those. If you do,
It was cleaning up timelines is what I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was extending time so that we know what the next time frame is.
sounds good.
think
If
it
you have
needs
any
any
questions on those, I'd be happy to answer them.
No? I think that's it.
That's it for me. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you. There's something on here for roundabout plans later on.
Yeah.
Would you like me to stick around for that guy?
Can we hit him on that while he's here?
Yeah, I was gonna say, why don't we just go ahead and move the roundabout up so that then Tyler can go home.
And that item we were going to bring up, and I had discussions with Danny at the same time about getting involved from an engineering standpoint with utility relocation. And depending on what direction the board wants to move with irrigation and landscaping to go beyond county spec, possibly getting involved on that side too. But there'll be a significant amount of utility relocation involved with this project.
Question I've got is that I was looking at that plan, those plans, that's 60%. I'm a monkey's uncle. They don't have any design information on there, no drainage information on there. There's nothing. As I look at it,
They didn't have room to put anything more on it.
Exactly.
it's called layers.
We don't even have any room to do the
The problem I ran into is when I'm looking at it, it appears to me that the improvement to the east to facilitate the off and ingress egress lines going to the east are coming into the road owned by us and land owned by us. And I can't tell if the 100, I believe Griffin Drive for the first two, or I'm sorry, Commerce Lakes Drive going east for the first 200 feet is 120 foot wide. And then it abruptly drops down to 80 feet. But they're going well into that because the right-of-way, the east right-of-way of Gateway Boulevard is our property line. So they're doing all these improvements over onto our road, not the least of which, I don't see any utility information of how they're going to do that. To me, that's probably pretty simple. I don't think it's a big deal. But man, I'm looking at the drainage in that area, and I don't see anything on there that tells me how they're going to get that water from A to B. Because it looks like to me they're putting fill and sidewalks and road where we have ditches right now. There's no pipes in that area. So I'd like to see a drainage plan of how they plan on getting that water and keeping it from filling up what is right now a ditch and going into Saucy Meatball. Unless they're gonna have a boat access.
Well,
And where are people gonna park?
There's no ditch.
That's right.
Solves that tollway zone.
I think that's called collateral damage. But I'll tell you, they're pushing us for a response on a set of plans that to me look a little weak.
And say Danny and I had some conversations about this, and the engineer for the county wanted comments by yesterday, and I told him we were having the board meeting today to discuss it. But we had a preliminary meeting with them, and they did not know that there was a gas line that existed, the lift station on the corner we have, wastewater, sanitary,
told them
force
that
main,
stuff.
water lines, irrigation. And they also were kind of depending on us to circulate the information, which they might have been sorry they asked, because I hand-delivered plans to the property owners and also the property management companies. They weren't aware of the communications cable going to the FBI building. There's some significant impacts there. And like I said, I actually hand-delivered the plans, and the last time I know, the owner of Saucy Meatball was talking to Commissioner Pendergrass, and he was having him call the engineer, and I don't think the engineer liked what the owner of the restaurant had to
I'm
say on his
surprised they
corner.
didn't ask you what FBI building.
Hey, Chris, one thing also, and Chris, I had brief email exchanges, and Mr. Tinkle mentioned it. I can't tell from this, nor from the larger set of plans, what the right-of-way line is as to the district-owned portion of Commerce Lakes Drive. So that's interesting. If they're going to take or use some of the district right-of-way, there might be some compensating trade-offs. And I find interesting or curious that this engineer did not know about those facilities being in the Gateway Boulevard right-of-way, because the county has a copy of the Alta survey that was performed when West WCI conveyed Gateway Boulevard to Lee County. And those have actually been recorded where they have all the facilities are there. So I think that's curious.
At the 30% meeting, you and I sat next to each other. We sat there for 40 minutes, and they were ready to dismiss this, and we never even talked about utilities. It was almost like, utilities? We told them about it, and we came back, and you have since given them copies of all the stuff from up in the hot box, all the as-bills of everything.
And like I said,
what they used it
like I
for.
said, the DOT has the survey that was performed, because if you recall, the level of detail in that survey was pretty good of all the facilities in the right-of-way. So
I think one of the first questions we might consider asking is have you guys ever done one of these projects before?
Well, if you remember at that meeting, they said they were trying to be very careful because this is the first roundabout the county's built, and they didn't want to screw it up.
Off to a good start.
So Tyler's looking forward to it.
Chris, should the comments be that we are incapable of making cogent comments because the level of detail is insufficient, or?
I think what they need to do is come in here, and when Tyler and the gang is here, and we get a little bit bigger table, and we go through all this stuff. As I'll tell you, I'm not satisfied with those plans. Those are no more 60% plans than man in the moon. No way.
Flaherty, did you have a comment?
I did have a question, okay, because when you're coming out of one of the streets, they have, according to this one and that one, a yield so that they're gonna go, but there's 2 lanes coming down, and I've never seen a roundabout where you yield and then have 2 lanes coming down, and that to me is a little bit different.
I can tell you all about roundabouts.
You-
2 months.
Been there, done
2
that.
weeks and
You went the wrong way on them. I think we need to tell them that we've got these concerns, but these questions aren't going to get answered unless we have a meeting with them. Somebody's going to have to explain these.
Plantation and Crystal.
And I think Tyler, typically on the projects they work with, the road designer works in conjunction or is paid to do the utility relocation at the same time, and this seems to be just totally ignoring the property and the utility aspect of it.
I'm gonna take the risk of sounding silly here. They have, so where are we at in this process? They've submitted these plans to Gateway outside of just this? Like, you guys have a set of draft plans from them?
Right over there.
Okay.
Use your imagination when you look at them.
Well, I mean, I mean, I can tell you about 5 or 6 concerns I have just from looking at this little one in the board book. I mean, are they proposing right-of-way acquisition? Because that's not within the right-of-way right now.
No,
It was
they don't
coming,
think
yeah.
they're gonna
It was to
take
my
any
comment.
private property, according to the meeting we
At
had.
the very first
Well-
meeting, I said, how you gonna build this without getting more land? Just
I mean-
squeezing it.
I think I could show anybody in here where the right-of-way line is on this map, and the road's outside of it, so
Way out of it.
I don't know. Maybe I
They
shouldn't
said
say
they
things like
had
that right
enough
here. There's, I guess what I should say is we would be happy to review the
But he
plans
was
that they
winking when
provided
he
and
said
provide
it.
the comments that Gateway should be concerned about.
And my point is, how far down the road are we going to get with disputing, with additional fact-finding before they determine that this is not a project that they can complete and there would have to maybe go to an alternative solution,
Like a street light?
Like a
which,
streetlight.
might have been the preferable
Yeah.
choice for a lot of people in the beginning. So, I mean, in the interest of time, and again, I think we're going to have to hit the end of the road before.
I think we need a meeting.
You ever see government admit that they made a mistake?
Well,
No.
Can
not publicly.
Can I ask this question? Does Tony, do you know how it reads in the agreement as far as utility relocations in the right-of-way that was transferred? Is Gateway responsible for that, or is the county?
If I recall correctly, yes, and also I think the statutory scheme is that way too, I believe. But again, that gets into the discussion about if they want to utilize part of the Commerce Lakes Drive right-of-way. Usually there's compensation that accompanies that, and so there's an opportunity for trade-off.
Bargaining.
Well, I mean, I don't know how we could even have that roundabout built without all the lights down Gateway Boulevard being upgraded. As part of that deal.
Trouble is, that's on our nickel. I remember
No,
that.
it's part of the deal.
I've seen more interesting conversations in compensation and
Yeah, just saying.
occur,
If there was an opportunity.
like
I mean-
relocating entry signs and monument signs.
I mean, this says that this is here for informational purposes only, so, what, I guess,
Lack thereof.
we're,
It's an engineering catch-all.
so, Chris, what are you wanting to come out of this discussion?
Well, I talked to Danny about getting a task order, and I provided those plans electronically to him. But you have to remember, those came over like toward, I think, the 22nd, 26th of August. And, we've had them a week. So, and they asked for comments by September 4th, and I gave them a list yesterday of the concerns, and that the board would be discussing it today, but we'd be back to them. So I expect to see a task order, and especially focused on utility relocation.
Does Randy
Probably
know
get
about
into rights away and those other issues at the next meeting from Danny.
Does
Okay.
does Tetra Tech need a copy of?
I sent him electronically.
Oh,
if you'd like
electronic.
to-
Okay.
I see a couple copies of there. Can I grab
you,
one of those?
You can help yourself. There's a copy of the street lighting, the signage, and then the 60% plans.
Okay, let me ask you this, if you don't mind, in the interest of time, just because we're gonna put together a task and then 2 weeks later it's gonna get approved by the board and then we're gonna start
Go
doing it.
concurrent.
Like, can we just start doing this under our main engineering contract with you guys?
We need to do this quickly.
We have
We
a
don't want to
traffic
wait.
item
think
on there
that's
for
agreed.
miscellaneous.
I mean, do we?
Is that
should-
okay?
I mean, I would make a motion to approve the start of that work if we need something for the books.
I do too.
To initiate Tetra Tech to begin preliminary discovery and work.
Chris has that within his budget to do that, so discretion, so we can do that. I think the big thing is the quicker you get on it, to see if you agree with what I think Chris and I have looked at. It scares me. It just doesn't look like to me somebody's thinking of all the things that are gonna happen.
And we're gonna get blamed for half of it, you wait and see.
I'll be happy at half. I think we'll get blamed for all of it.
Do you want to form a motion?
I think a formal motion is a good idea, since we're,
You make it up,
So, yeah, so I'll make a motion to give Tetra Tech, to create a task authorization and begin work to review preliminary designs of the
60% plans.
60% plans of the roundabout, and to come back with that task authorization.
And in the meantime, coordinate with Chris on, so that we can keep those guys informed of what we're doing, but they gotta understand that this just isn't, something's wrong here.
so he made a motion, or you
I'll second
seconded
it,
it?
yes.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yes.
Sure, go ahead.
I have a question for the attorney.
Go
Yes,
ahead.
ma'am.
Yes, do we have to have the, open to the public Because it's actually.
Yes, I think the chair could ask for any public comment on that item.
Thank you, Mrs. Flaherty. Any comments? Open for questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Tyler. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
You're welcome. Sorry, just to bring one other thing up, I guess. Have Lee County discussed the timing of when they plan to construct this?
Next April.
January?
They told us they're gonna start at the end of season next year, actual construction.
Well, if that's the case, and I'm assuming based on that, there's a bunch of stuff that they're gonna expect us to relocate. I mean, it's just something that I guess the district should start planning on doing. I mean, that's not a fast process.
To my knowledge, that issue, keep in mind, you're dealing with a consultant, and you're dealing with staff people at the county. I don't know that they have gotten up to where Randy and/or the county powers to be have passed on the nuances of our agreement that would bring up those issues. I don't think they're there yet.
Okay.
But I think a light bulb's gonna go off one of these days and say, wait a minute, well, they already know that the signs, the landscaping, and the lighting is ours. We know that, we discussed that. But this utility relocation has never come up in any meetings.
Yeah, and this is to get under the agreement, they're required to give us 90 days written notice.
So, I mean, I'm just throwing this out there for the board to think about. I mean, if January is truly the date, which I kind of highly doubt just based on looking at that. I mean, you're talking about 60 days really just to procure a contractor and then another 60 days probably to build this. That's 120. Plus, you're going to need plans to relocate your facilities. Plus, you're going to need permits from the DEP to relocate your facilities. I mean, that's 6 months. So just something to start thinking about if that's a real.
They're gonna want us to be done and out of their way.
Right. Typically, utility relocations go either prior to the road or by the same contractor through some sort of agreement. And I don't know if that's what the county is anticipating, that their contractor is going to do the work and have Gateway pay for it. I don't know.
Never came up in the meeting. Never came up.
So just food for thought, I guess.
And on the utility side, that type of work could easily approach $400,000, $500,000 in that intersection. Because of the nature of the valves and the facilities and having to move them or protect them or repipe, it could be a huge undertaking. You know, $250,000 could go real quick and it could double that.
The storm drainage, though, I don't think is ours. I think that's going to be theirs.
Within the roadway, yeah.
It was within the roadway. But the utilities, and I don't know that they've talked to FPL or TECO or any of those people. I just don't think they have a clue of what is out there in that intersection.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Okay, that brings us back to 4A.
Say, stoplights looking better.
Oh, no,
and
I'm
better.
sorry. District management report. Sorry, Chris, I almost bypassed you.
Sure, that's okay. And I'll just briefly touch on a few of these things when we talk to the staff folks over at DEP. Water quality and utilities, and that is a huge priority with the new governor. They not only brought in a new manager, but hired 6 positions for sanitary sewer overflow reports. So previously, when they were reported and got filed away, now there's an investigation being done under each one. And the staff person told me, once you get the warning letter, the fine letter will follow. And we escaped a fine on this time only because we showed them the amount of money spent in our capital budget, the procurement of the pumps, the upgrading of the lift stations, and the section of pipe that basically broke out. I brought in a box to show them it was a failure, you know, the ductile iron pipe. But they're basically looking at fining people and letting utilities know you better start spending money on your systems, because even if they fail due to age, mismanagement, there will be monetary fines.
What's a typical fine, Chris? Just
Typical
any idea?
fines, they were proposing during the legislative session, but it didn't pass, $1 a gallon. And the city of St. Petersburg had a 12 million gallon sewage spill on one of these incidents. But typically they would start out with a consent order and $3,000 to $5,000 and then charge you for their attorney fees. And And also previously where they would look at these and say, you know, we're going to take that fine, but we're going to let you spend the money to upgrade your system. Now they're going to keep the money.
Yeah.
Because they have a lot of salaries to pay now too for this additional enforcement. But it was a very good meeting with the folks. And, you know, one thing we talked about, and Kenny's a new fan of possibly getting a vac truck.
Yeah, I liked their deal down there on, was it August 21st? The big, what do you call it, algae meeting down at Coconut Point. Never heard a word about all the septic tanks that are directly connected to bodies of water here in this county. Nobody said a word about that.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons the city of Cape Coral, you know, they're talking $100 million SRF is because they're getting those septic
Put in
tanks
sewers.
off the island. Yeah.
Go down, just take a boat when the river's down, go down the Caloosahatchee. And especially after you go past downtown, hug the Fort Myers shore. You'll see raw sewage lines coming straight out of multi-million-dollar houses. And nobody's doing a thing about it. And then they want to know why they have algae problems. Give me a break.
And I'm just going to touch on a couple of these other items quick, and then I'm going to bring Kenny in. He has some slides and some things to talk about, some of the work that we've been doing. Soccer season was delayed until yesterday because of all the rain we've had and the fields being underwater. We've opened 3 of the fields. The back fields we still have closed at the moment. We're attributing part of that to drainage coming from Timber Creek and sheet flow into the wetland in the back of the property in the school. We filed a formal complaint with the Water Management District. They sent a notice to Lennar about that and no perimeter berm. And this morning, I had a contractor out setting some grade stakes and doing drone photos showing that sheet flow water coming over that we're going to send to the district. You know, it's one thing to give them a written complaint and then respond to it. It's another to hand them the video to show them what's going on. In regards to the blasting with that too, we may set up a vibratory detection equipment to see if there is any impact to our well or the tanks over here. Doing some work on the playground equipment, doing some more work on digital mapping and the soccer field and nutrient analysis, moving forward with that. And I'm also going to bring up, for just a brief introduction, Glenn, you want to step up for a minute? And he is a new hire that we're basically working with Parks and Recreation and Facilities Management. We'll be overseeing Mainscape and also some of the pool work. And he's been an assistant manager, hardscapes manager, irrigation manager, worked with Bonita Bay Communities, a number of HOAs. And Glenn, you want to say hello and give him a minute or two on your background?
Like Chris said, my name is Glenn Shorger. I'm very happy to be here and excited to come on board. I was at Bonita Bay for 4 years around the grounds maintenance department and HOA. And then I took off to the Keys for a few years and then came back due to Irma. And then I was currently at Bonita National, which is one of the best local golf courses personally right now, I think. So I do have turf management experience, and we're hoping that we can get it turned around here for y'all and make it a more beautiful place to enjoy in the soccer field. Soccer's very passionate to me. I played on a traveling team when I was younger. So soccer's, I like it. That field's a goal for me to see what we can do to make it better for everybody and for the community and for everybody to play on it.
Welcome.
Welcome
Thank you.
aboard.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's, you know, basically some of the hiring we're doing, I term it as boots on the ground, but people with experience working with contractors and looking at turf, looking at irrigation systems. And Glenn also doesn't have a problem being behind a shovel, so if we have a broken valve or some issues out there when Mainscape isn't around, or in some of our utility work, we always run into irrigation lines, much like Billy Shaw doing a lot of the electrical work. He can help us out with that and reduce those expenses we're paying the consultant.
And what's Javier's role?
He's going to be doing public works, and he's similar too. He has a number of utility certifications, safety certifications, maintenance, traffic.
Is he a specialist, or I mean, he's a
Concrete.
well, no, I'm sorry. He's so the supervisor,
Right.
or manager role is still technically vacant. This is
Yeah, I'm
where
kind
I'm
of
going with
instead of calling them managers, I would call them facilities managers or program managers, because I'm trying to flatten the whole organization out and do a lot of cross-training. And when I talk about public works, it's the same thing, people that can work on storm drains, work on the lake banks, reset stop signs, pour sidewalk pads, bring the drainage system up over at the soccer park. I mean, someone that can handle that work from an administrative end, but also hook up a concrete mixer to a truck and go over there and pour a pad or bring something up that needs to be done. I'd say skilled tradesmen with administrative and management experience.
Can you
guess
fill
my-
potholes?
Yes, sir.
We've got some.
Don't start. I know where this is going.
And-
Road out front.
And well, we've filled most of those, and part of it, when you look at the bill to do some of the work we've done at Pelican recently with curbs and that, and when you look and see what the paving contractors cost to bring them in and do that, you know, you can pay someone's salary for 4 months in materials for one instance.
We've got
So
some
let me
out
circle
here
back.
that
Hold on. Let me
Mr.
circle back
Banks is-
my point. So Chris, I mean, we've had discussions about your org structure. So right now
Manning table.
we've got you, and then we've got Kenny that's
Right.
in a supervisor leadership role. Then there's nothing else. And with Mike leaving, that's another position that's vacated.
Mike 1 or Mike 2? We've lost 2 mics. Both of them were
most
in.
recent Mike.
Okay, that's Mike Kraft.
Yeah, dollar bill, Mike. But my point is,
Bean counter Mike.
and I understand your kind of your philosophy around boots on the ground and getting those individuals that are actually doing the work, and that's critical. What is still your plan around, you know, that layer of management?
Public
where
Works
there's a
manager.
gap, you know, the public works manager or supervisor, whatever you want to call them, and then on that accounting side.
We're going to bring a revised org chart to show you that, trying to,
Good.
you know, October 1, we're trying to flatten that out. But I'm looking at bringing Kenny more into an operations manager and then having those field people, each of them under that area, you know, specific area, parks and recreation, you know, your public works, and then your drainage and lakes.
Well, the thought was at one time, and I still think it is a good idea, is the Public Works manager have a ponds and wetlands background to where they can then have the new people reporting into them in the various sections that are Public Works, and then have the utilities set that away, and then both of those managers report to you.
Right.
I think the question is that where are we at on getting a Public Works manager that has that ponds and wetlands experience that can do that work?
I'm working on that right now. I haven't gotten that person. It's the same thing, someone in stormwater that can supervise the drain cleaning, repairs to the pond banks, work with the pond bank contractors and easements, but that's one spot I still have to fill.
We have a hole.
And what you'll also see is a lot of the people,
The finance guy gone.
I'm sorry?
2 holes.
Well, and I just want to call this out to the board because we need to be aware of the position that we're in currently. We're at a continuity risk issue right now from a staff perspective. When we look at our organization, when you look at each specific position, you have to ask yourself, if that person were to leave tomorrow, how does that impact day-to-day business or our overall continuity? And I think Chris, in his role, if we just start at the top, if Chris were to leave tomorrow, would we have someone that could step in, whether in an interim position, and cover that? And sometimes it could be more than one person, where you don't have any degradation of business, or there's not a risk of any issues. Right now, I'd say we don't have that. And if you go underneath, and if we have our 3 separate channels, let's call it business and operations, or business accounting, finance, utilities, and public works. Well, we haven't had anyone in the public works position for about 2 years now in a leadership role. Kenny's been in his role and has done a fantastic job. And I'm sure Kenny probably absorbed some of that public works oversight. So I would say that's kind of covered, at least right now. But now that Mike has left, we have no one that can step into that finance accounting type role. So we are in a very, very delicate situation right now. If Kenny were to leave tomorrow, we would be in serious trouble, and same thing with Chris if he were to leave. So the board needs to be aware of where we're at. Now, granted, I think Chris and staff have been able to, manage through these times, but the purpose of that organizational structure was to have
Backup.
to have three, leadership positions that are covering finance and accounting, and I would even throw operations more on that side, utilities and public works. That gives you the continuity in those three areas. And then underneath, I think this is the area that I think you've done a really good job in staff of building out those expertise or those specialities. So in cross training, so if one person leaves, okay, we're not at a point where it's causing a lot of risk. Someone else can absorb it. So I think your third tier, I think, is in really good shape. Your second tier is where you need to really look at, what that structure is, not only to support the district and maintain continuity, but also to give yourself the ability to focus on the most important things, which is overseeing the whole operations. Because I know that you like getting in the weeds, and it's a great, I think it's good for us, but at the same time,
It's only so many hours a day.
right, you've got to be able to step away and have these three individual leaders, carrying a little more load.
And that was, now that we've got a lot of newer employees, and I think it's a good time for, Chris and I talked about that he was gonna bring an org chart to the
Yeah.
board so that we can actually see what's there. I mean, he knows what he's
We haven't
got.
changed the complex, or the idea, have we? We're still on the same original plan, which means we have those two things that Doug just mentioned, the public works side and the
Utilities.
utility administration side. Mike and Mike. We've lost two Mikes, don't hire another Mike. But my concern is unless we steal somebody, because I've been checking and looking around, this guy that I'm envisioning to do public works that has this ponds and wetlands background, that's like finding a needle in a haystack.
Well, and part of that too, when you talk Mr. Banks and building that area out, part of that building out is people that get in a truck and go to work, and some of that little upper level. I've brought a few people in here, and the fact that they don't have an office or a place to work out of is a huge detriment.
And the last thing I'll say to that is you can have, if we got this three-tiered structure with three levels of management in, let's call them business units or functional areas, you can have extremely strong manager in this area or an extremely strong manager in this area, and then have one that you're developing up. Like, because that public works, I think we're going to have to find someone that has good experience, certification, that's got, is coachable and upward mobility, and grow them into, this leadership role. Or we're going to have to find someone that's got tons of experience, that's looking to get out of a bigger environment, that probably will work for, maybe 5 more years before they retire. So that, you're not going to find that person that we're looking for, someone that's in middle of their career, that's going to come in and be probably happy in this environment for the next 20 years.
Or you steal them.
Yeah.
That's that's what you're gonna do.
So
You're
I'm
gonna
saying,
steal them.
I don't have a problem with taking a public works and grooming someone into that ideal role, because we're a small organization. We have to wear many hats, and it's going to be very difficult. And Ed, to find that person that you probably envision in your head. There might be 3 people that could do that in this, in the surrounding area.
I think the situation we ran into, Mike, was a wake-up call of what the reality is. We aren't competing. We're not competing.
So,
And
We'll
I
be a
think-
training ground is all we're going to be, and we'll get somebody into a position that somebody comes steals it.
and it's
Maybe-
fine if that's going to be, if that's the profile that we're looking for, someone that is, at a certain level of their career, highly motivated, and they're only going to be here for 3 years, then we can build a model around that. But
We
we
need more
can't expect someone to
consistency.
stay, in a particular role, and not have someone underneath that's ready to jump in. I know you're aware of it and you're working on it. I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that there is a risk here that I want everyone to be aware of, and I know you're doing a lot on your end.
I suspect we all are a little bit, with Mike leaving, a little bit.
Gun shy.
Aware of.
Yeah. Well, that and the fact that we haven't replaced the other Mike yet either. And we got holes in ponds and wetlands. We got holes, big holes.
And we should be filling that with Javier, and he's the kind of person you can mold into that supervisory administrative, and he's a top flight person. And I mentioned to the chair, the one thing positive about this is the staff we hire and we've trained, other people want to hire them.
Yeah.
what
Now we
happens.
just got to keep them.
what happens.
So,
Yeah.
I think it's great. All right. That's all for me.
Kenny, you want to get up and we'll talk about utilities?
Just for
Let me see where this file is.
This is all.
Was there a utilities report in here, or was it just part of?
He's going to be bringing it up.
Sure.
Okay, all right. Just wanna make sure.
Good afternoon, Kenny Hall, Utility Manager. With this report, I basically wanted to cover some of our new hires, some of our new capabilities. Three big points that I really wanted to touch on after I go over the Commonwealth Lift Station. What I basically wanted to start out, and I also wanted to touch on the FDEP report. The September 26th, myself and Ed Neef, for the utility manager for Lee County, will be doing a walkthrough for this entire area. They've requested a walkthrough. We're going to walk through the plant, the entire operation. They've requested to see at least 5 lift stations. They want to go through and look at them. And also, on the follow-up of that meeting, I sent Deanna Newberg, who is the assistant director for FDEP, all of the stuff that we've done, which they were very impressed with, the amount of money and the improvements that we've made to the system. They requested that we send that to them, and I sent that to them, I think, 2 days after that meeting. So they will be back on the 26th of this month to do a walkthrough.
It's FDEP?
Yes, this is Deanna Newberg. When you have a sewer spill or anything like that, she is the person that you directly report to. She is the assistant director for this district. So basically what I wanted to do is just kind of show you all, this is the Commonwealth Lift Station. It should be on your screen. If you look at this, this is one of the biggest, kind of the time forgot this station. This panel sitting right here is a 1987 lift station panel that has not been replaced. And it's sitting in about 1.5 feet of water. If you look down here where my cursor is, that is the actual wet well sitting under about 18 inches of water.
When was this taken?
This was taken prior to Irma, 2017.
This was after the big rain that
Yes.
we had? Okay.
And what the biggest problem was is that it had turned into a bowl. It had landscaping around it. It was all removed. So this is another angle of the same exact thing. You can see the level where the road is, the car, this gigantic bowl here, which is just filling with water. No drainage, no anything. So this was a very expansive one. We had to do a lot to this. A lot of the contractors were not interested in doing this project. This is the new one. This is standing in the same place, and it kind of gives you an idea of what we did. We lifted this entire area up, provided a drain in the bottom, added sod, removed the panel, added a brand new panel. We lifted the wet well and the vault caps up 24 inches on both sides. Did a complete rehab of the station, of the wells, of everything. So basically what we got was a brand new lift station. That's on the other side, all resodded. And basically that's
Fantastic.
yeah,
Kenny.
that's
You build
basi-
a berm?
we slanted it down because of the biggest problem that we were having was drainage. We had just had massive amounts of drainage, and it had never taken, there was no drain in place, so it basically just turned into a big bowl.